Baby Beard Media presents a Roll to Cast RPG podcast in the world of Cyberpunk 2020 by Mike Pondsmith. Starring Ellen Graham as Cassie Glass, Sean Flurl as Junk, and Christopher Bond as Uncle Bob. Story, referee, and additional rules by Phil Harker-Smith. Designed by Jack Sumner. Music by Paul Goodman. This is Going Mainstream.
Hello and welcome to episode 0 of Cyberpunk 2020 Going Mainstream. I am the referee, I'm Phil, and with me is
Ellen
playing
as Cassie Glass.
And
I'm Chris, I'm playing Uncle Bob.
Nice. And
I'm Sean and I'm playing Junk.
okay, Ellen, what can you tell us also what career your character's have as well?
I'm a rocker. Rocker
Nice.
girl, rocker boy, whatever you want to call it. Just a rocker in general.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So we can be gender neutral.
I think we
in the
should.
future. Yeah, just rockers.
Yeah.
I don't see gender, so
No, it's very nice of you.
So I'm Uncle Bob is a media man.
nice.
He is a media career path.
And
And Mr. Junk, or just Junk, is
Just Junk to you.
Just Junk to you. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Junk was my father.
To your friends.
Junk Senior
Friends call me Junk.
is a fixer, Mr. Fixer Man.
nice. So yeah, as I said before, I'm the referee of the game. I've come up with a campaign, and so it's a custom campaign set in Night City, which is one of the core locations in the Cyberpunk 2020 lore. So I guess I'll start with a little bit about Cyberpunk itself as a genre. I'll have a quick chat about that and what it means to us. I'll kick that off with myself. I guess my favourite cyberpunk bits of media are Blade Runner,
Yep.
both the 80s film and the more recent one with Ryan Gosling. And in games, I would have to say it's got to be the Deus Ex series, particularly the modern ones, all about transhumanism and the potential of humankind. That's one of the things that really appeals to me about cyberpunk is the potential for what humans can be. And the other aspect I really like is the division between the haves and haves not, because I feel it's basically an extrapolation of the world we live in today.
It wasn't any different in the 80s.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't
It's
feel
the
much different.
Same problem now.
Ellen, what's your kind of favourite bit of cyberpunk media?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, you've already said Blade Runner.
You
Ghost
can
in the
say it too.
We'll all say Blade Runner.
I mean, obviously, Blade Runner. I feel like it has a bit of icky dynamics that it's not quite dealt with, which I feel is right for like the world of cyberpunk. It is very like, if you imagine Ronald Reagan's 80s America, that's the place that this like awful, this it's a really gritty world with not a lot of hope in it, which is kind of reflecting of the time and I think where we are now. So I'm really interested in the socio-political themes. My favorite cyberpunk medium is probably Concept Album by My Chemical Romance. It's actually set in 2019, the year we are now. And it's called The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys. And it is very, it's got the Mad Max influence. It's got, wasteland in the desert. It's also got a big youth culture, which I think is really important for 80s cyberpunk. It's a whole thing of the kids are now trying to take back what little control they've got yet left. And like, this isn't a world for old people. The older generation has kind of fucked it.
Yeah.
Now we're taking back in the way that we can, and it's very stylish over substance. And there's also a really cool supplementary thing for that where they take where those characters have been and they take a little bit in the future, and that's a comic book. It's also called True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys. I very much recommend.
That's Gerard Way, isn't it?
It is Gerard Way. He's a really good comic book artist, and there's some really good themes about the main thing that I'm really jazzed about for Cyberpunk is ownership of the body. when we start trading out parts, and also especially since the world is now owned by corps, it's a bit hard to feel like the corps also don't own our bodies. We're kind of renting out parts as well.
So we will get to characters a bit more detail in the future, as a bit further down the line. But Cassie, your character, she had a hand mutilated, right?
Yeah.
And she replaced that.
Yep.
And so that trading out a body part also represents a kind of a point of personal history.
Yeah,
as
a turning
well.
point for her and a reminder of her trauma at the same time.
Yeah,
So.
Chris.
So I like the Deus Ex games. I think that's the big one. Akira! Akira! You can't say it without
You have to, right?
kind of shouting it.
Have the weird
Yeah.
music in the background.
And I love Transmetropolitan.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about Transmet, because it's very kind of important to the influence of your character.
Yeah, that's right. So it features a Hunter S. Thompson character, a gonzo journalist.
It's a set of comic books.
Yeah, it's a set of
So,
comic. Firstly, it's a set of comic books, and it features a man named Spider Jerusalem, who's based on Hunter S. Thompson, who's a interviewer and a article writer,
A gonzo journalist.
A gonzo journalist.
Yeah.
And it's about power. It's set in I can't remember what year it's set in, but I think further than the cyberpunk setting. It's quite far into the future, but it's kind of post, or in some areas post morality. So like Long Pig is like freely available on the streets. You just like grab a stick of human feet,
Human meat.
yeah, and just start eating.
Nom, nom, nom.
Some
so
people
it's-
might not be familiar with the term long pig.
That's right, long pig.
And
That's right.
Too right.
and fair enough. But yeah, like I for me, Cyberpunk, the themes that really interest me are about government control, about kind of widespread conspiracies, paranoia, and a unequal status system. Those are the big things about shaking up the system and that system being an oppressive, unhumanizing, like dehumanizing, kind of washing you grey.
One thing I really like about those comic books, the Transmetropolitan comic books, is not only the great character stuff that's in them. Spider's a brilliant character, but there's some really detailed panels that just show off the world. The crazy crowds, like the thick with all kinds of different people, sprouting all kinds of different kind of modifications, and then the detail on the streets, the rubbish piled up, the graffiti, the squalor is really like brought to life, and it's really punchy in that comic book.
There's a great part in it where a bunch of gang is roving around and they're reading people's genetic code, and they're beating people up for what they think are like impurities, basically.
Wow,
So it's like people are still trash. They're
Yeah.
just using technology to be trash.
Yeah,
you
to
know,
be
like they're
even
still
more
yeah, exactly.
to
So-
define their trash.
to define their trash. So it's more racist, you know.
Yes.
It's about your genetic code.
Yeah.
Moving on
Moving
from
on.
racism, Sean.
Rife for comedy.
Sean, what about you and your relationship to Cyberpunk?
It's interesting. We have a very estranged relationship, or more so. I
We
don't.
don't speak to each other
You
anymore.
dated
We don't.
once. It was a bit ugly.
Look, we tested the waters. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
I don't really have much of a history with Cyberpunk. That's actually probably what excites me the most. Like, I am a sci-fi boy, but other than that, like, I know you're more on the kind of hard sci-fi. We've talked about this.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas my history is more in kind of more the popcorny kind of sci-fi. But
Space opera
Yeah.
and fantasy sci-fi.
I
that
like
kind
me
of
some
thing.
Star Wars. I like
Yeah.
me some Firefly.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think the most recent thing is I've been pushing, I mean, more on a generalized scale, I've been pushing for a D&D campaign for ages on this podcast. And rightfully so, you're like, no. And then when you thought, okay, what about Cyberpunk? And I started looking at especially the gameplay trailers for the 2077 that's coming out. And I thought, well, fuck, this is rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a great world.
I got so jazzed on those trailers, I gotta say. Like, I understand why people are already cosplaying and just like, it's the same thing we were talking about with, Transmetropolitan and Blade Runner and Ghost in the Machine. It's just like people fall in love with this world, even though it's not something that it's not nice.
No.
But people just love to imagine like the detail and get really in there with their nails. It's fun.
It's juicy. It's crunchy. Do you have any other, like, have you played Deus Ex or anything like that?
No, that's the thing. I haven't actually played a lot of Cyberpunk video games. I haven't consumed a lot of media. You were the one that introduced me to Akira.
We did a little showing when we were talking about that.
So, like, I'm a baby when it comes to this, and that's more what excites me. I think what does kind of get me going for this game, especially, and Cyberpunk in general, is that kind of feeling of everything's in the now and everything's immediate. There is not really much of a tie to the nostalgic looking back or making too many future plans, because you can't think long term in this life. So it's just kind of about, it's not me.
The world
it's not me at all. I'm very much not that person.
Especially these characters, right? The people who are at the heart of 2020, the role-playing game, are punks. That's where the original kind of name comes from. These guys who are punks, who are edge runners, they're called, who don't have a lot of future unless they carve one out.
Yeah.
Whereas we now think of Cyberpunk as more applied to the world, as the setting. But I think it's worth thinking about keeping focused on the people in that world.
Yeah.
And being able to become them and think in that way where they're close to the edge.
100%.
Keep the punk in Cyberpunk, man.
Yeah.
And the other thing as well is that I've just always loved it, especially in the 80s when there was an imagining of what 30 years in the future was going to look like.
Fantastic.
Like 2020's next year. We're not even...
I was watching Escape from New York about halfway through it recently, and I think it's set in like 1994 or something.
Good autumn.
Yeah.
It's like you see the title card and it says like 1994 now, and you're like,
The thing is,
Kurt Russell.
There's one thing I do love about Cyberpunk, and it's the stuff that's inched into our world now.
Yeah.
And a lot of, because the influences that they took to make the world were already there, like in their nascent stages. But like, because a lot of things are borrowed from, Japanese, Korean culture, Chinese culture, especially because China is such a huge conglomerate. Like,
yeah, I think globalism as well is something that they predicted in a way
really,
that not many other media did.
And when I think a lot about how the world, like, and people in China have to deal with smog all the time, so those face masks, like, it's a daily thing. And the characters in Cyberpunk, they have to deal with acid rain, like, it's on the forecast. It's like, I gotta bring my car
acid
in.
rain again.
I think one thing that's interesting, just to quickly finish on the setting and the world and Cyberpunk in general, I think one thing that didn't kind of turn out how they imagined is the gang culture. Gangs are such a huge part of Cyberpunk, both this version of it and many iterations of Cyberpunk media. And in our world, like, these street gangs and things that was such a big part of 80s and 80s culture and 80s movies have actually kind of gone away to a degree. I think that's grown from like more militarized policing styles, which is something that's happened even here in Australia.
There are things as like funded gangs as well.
Sure.
Like, a lot of governments getting into bed with bikie gangs and sort of going, okay, we don't like you, but here's ways that we police you at the same time and give you certain liberties. So it's kind of like, you stay to your territory, we stay to ours.
Bit scary,
Yikes.
yeah. But I think that's something that's really fun about this particular world is that the gangs are pushed to they're dialed up to 11, they're crazy, they're weird, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
They rule the night. They've got a whole section of the city that's basically given over to them. And
They've got wacky themes.
Yeah, it gives them a real kind of danger to them. I like it. So moving on to role-playing, I think it's kind of interesting for audience to find out what our history with role-playing is and where we come from. Me personally, I didn't get into tabletop RPGs until I was a full-blown adult. Until I was past.
Sorry, this is news to me.
2022.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I really had heard lots about D&D growing up, and I really wanted to try some. And I started to meet some people I was over here in Australia who were into it. My very first game, I think I joined a group at a local card shop, like a trading card shop, and it was awful.
No.
Was it good for you at the time? Did you think?
I mean, at the time I could see that it was terrible.
Oh, right.
It was mainly in the way the DM ran it from the book. It was the goblin moves 2 squares and throws a potion at you. And it was very boring. And I was like, I could give this way more flavor. I could make the goblin snarl at you nastily as he pops out behind a rock and hurls a potion through the air. Its noxious smell growing as it closes in on you. Right. And I was like, wow, I could do this. I could tell this story in a way that's way better. So for me, it was a real revelation to have someone do it badly because it inspired me to do it well.
That's exactly why I got the thoughts about doing Baby Beard in the first place, listening to podcasts and going, I can do this better.
Since then, I've played a whole bunch of games from the White Wolf series, Mage, a little bit of Changeling and Vampire. Played some of the wilder games like Exalted, which is all about being demigods in an anime universe.
Jesus Christ, that sounds awesome.
It's an interesting game.
I think it's burdened down by too many rules.
Right.
So it's a little hard it's a little esoteric to get into, and the lore is like a giant.
It's a big
tome.
lore. Yeah,
it's crazy, but it's kind of notable for its ambition, I would say. I've played some D&D, had lots of fun with that, and probably my favourite game to run before this is a game called Dark Heresy, which is based on Warhammer 40k. Chris has actually been in a game I've ran for that, Dark Heresy, and we had a lot of fun.
Cool.
So I just love being part of collaborative storytelling.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like a lost art. I like to imagine, this may be completely wrong, that way back when people would sit around fires and make up stories and chip in different parts of it. I like
chip in. Hey.
Maybe not. Maybe you just had one guy who knew all the stories who would come to the pub and tell you all the stories in a long sequence. But I think maybe people just made up shit together.
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you even see that in just... Maybe we don't have a big round the campfire storytelling culture as such, but you get that, I've heard so many stories. I was there at the first iteration of it. Something as simple as, this happened to me today. And I have heard that retold, and everyone puts their own spin on it. It becomes this Chinese whispers game of our own everyday folklore, basically, like that. And that's how it started. This was the story of what happened to this person on that day. And it just gets spun, and everyone chips in and adds their own thing to it, which I think is, it's magical.
Yeah. Well, do you want to seg into what your experience with role-playing games is?
Oh man, none.
That's cool. It's really nice to have fresh players.
I mean, I'm not fresh. I'm doing little. I think my first ever role-playing is D&D. Have a campaign. It's 5th edition, and I've just kind of started with a character who is super dumb. She's obsessed with kind of like getting paid, getting sexed, and that's about it. She's very surface level, so I thought that was a great jumping in point. Like, some characters don't have a dark backstory. Sometimes they're just there because they're bored, and this is the only way for them to, fulfill have a little bit of meaning in their life. So that's pretty much it for me. I'm an actor. I think we've all got performing background in some way or another. And so I thought it's the same as what we've been saying. Seen a lot of content and went, what could I add to this? Have people been approaching this from an acting background? Not that you need it, but maybe it would add something else,
Sure.
And I think there's something nice just about really getting your teeth in and kind of,
I think a lot of what people struggle with often when they're first starting role playing is stepping into character.
Oh, definitely,
and speaking in character can be extremely daunting, and can be a little bit awkward for people sometimes, especially if they're playing a character that's wildly different from themselves.
And
strong archetypes like you were talking about are like, if you're listening to this, you haven't played role playing game before, and you are thinking about it, go for strong archetypes.
Yeah.
Something something that has simple motivations.
Yeah.
It's not a cop out, and it's a great way to get started.
Because
with.
my character's really dumb, I can just really fall back on that and be like, I don't know.
Chris.
So if you've been only playing role-playing games, Phil, since when you in your 20s, that means I've been playing role-playing games longer than you, which is news to me.
Chris outranks you.
That's right.
Do you want my chair?
Please, no. You put in so much work. I couldn't imagine the amount of work you've put in is amazing already. But no, I've been playing role-playing games since I was 8.
Far out.
So my cousins bought a copy of Baldur's Gate, the isometric role-playing game for PC, and played it. And then we went, oh, there's a system under this, and stripped second edition D&D from the video game into pen and paper, and then cross-pollinated that. We took it to school and we cross-pollinated it with, do you guys remember like the series of books, the Redwall books?
Yes.
Yeah.
About knights and animals and stuff?
Yeah.
So we turned that into a role-playing game.
Cool.
Did you not
like-
have the internet or something?
No. No, we did not. This was the late 90s in Australia.
Yes.
In like, just in the country, basically.
Yeah.
I see. I see now the route.
So we stripped out the Baldur's Gate system and turned it into a pen and paper game. And then from there, I've gone through second edition. We actually managed to get the books for second edition. We went back to first edition. We did 3.5, fourth edition, Dark Heresy. And then I've been LARPing and running a national LARP I ran it for about a year. But I ran
what
a
is
local
LARPing for what people
live
don't know?
action role play. It's where you walk and talk as your characters. You don't just describe the action around a table.
Adelaide actually had a very large, long-running Vampire the Masquerade LARP.
Yes, we did.
Called City of Churches.
City Churches. I wasn't part of that one. I came into a game after that one.
Yeah.
But I ran that chapter, a chapter of that here for about 3 years. And yeah, so I've been role-playing for too long.
So this is my swan song.
That's right.
I'm retiring
Checking
after
out.
this.
It's been a great career of role-playing. I've made no money in it at all.
Can you tell us a little bit about either your experience DMing and how that alters your perspective on playing, or what you've kind of learnt playing, what it's brought to your life?
Yeah, so I think for me the kind of golden rule of role-playing games is the book informs the play style and the players inform the play style as well. So
Yeah.
like for people who know, like 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons has like a very kind of like square by square, inch by inch battle strategy kind of combat system to it. So you can't kind of play a cyberpunky sort of style to that. Like it informs a play style.
Yeah.
Like similarly, like I don't think it's very like cool to do that with a loosey-goosey kind of game where, you know, you're like counting inches and stuff like that in a game that's being largely described in people's imagination. So like for me, role-playing games have kind of made this wonderful thing where I'm like, okay, what do people want to talk about? What do people want to make? And what's the best way to do it? Like, how do we collaboratively come together and make a cool thing?
It's a really good point, because the gameplay is not there for nothing. Like, everything informs the story, or tries to anyway, inform the story. It's the same as video games. They don't, you know, if you're in a horror game and they haven't given you any weapons and it's very kind of stealth and hide, they've done that for a specific reason.
And it forms the way you approach
Exactly.
and play
That's
the
right.
game.
Yeah.
Game design, basically.
Yeah.
Like simple game design. Like well, the system informs the story. Because it does.
I think that's what some people miss a little bit. More tips for novice role players, I guess, is that the numbers and the dice are there to inform the story being told. They are not the story itself.
Yeah.
They
the
don't
game
do
is
that
not
for
the
me
mechanics.
because I'm bad with math. I've literally rolled something and just had to like
Stare at it.
stare at it for at least 20 seconds before the DM comes over to me.
Excuse me, what number is that?
Looks at the numbers, does the math for me, and goes, "Yeah, you did good. That thing you wanted to do, you did it.
You did
like,
it.
Oh, great.
So yeah, don't let the numbers get in your way. There are means to an
Never.
end.
That's right.
I think 10 plus 10 is 20. Yes, you got it.
I don't even, it doesn't even get in my way at all. I just brush past
It
it.
just slides right past you. What about you, Sean?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of the same answer, isn't it, from before? I've got very
20 years
minimal
experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I am 45.
Got
I
great skin.
first got introduced to even just the idea of like the D&D in that world. I used to play Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance for the PS2, which was this, for my money, was an amazing game, and I really wanted this to get my two brothers and play it as a 4-player, and love the idea of leveling up and going to the dungeons and seeing the dragons and the monsters, and I thought, oh, this is a really cool concept, having no idea that it stems from a tabletop system. Like the idea of role-playing just didn't compute in my 10-year-old brain. And then, you know, movies would come up. I mean, more recently, you see Stranger Things has kind of put it back in kind of the public mindset now, is going, oh, that's right, it's a thing. It's kind of, and I don't know whether that's moved the needle in bringing it back or not from a mainstream perspective. But over the past couple of years, I think, so all of us went to the same acting school. And I believe my first foray into D&D in general was with a game with you, Chris.
Was that your first game?
Yeah. 100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, running a D&D game with a bunch of actors is one of the most interesting experiences. like I've played with actors, but I've never played a game entirely with actors.
Entirely.
It's a time.
God,
And that was your first time?
Yeah, so I've now, up until this point, I've played D&D on 3 separate occasions, and we only did 1 session, and we all never returned. So I've started 3 different stories and never gotten past the first session. It's like if we did today and then just never returned.
We just broke
the
for lunch
campaign.
and then just never.
I'd be like, yeah, that's how D&D works. That's how role-playing works in general.
just roll a character, do their intro, and then walk away. And
that's
you never
awful.
have a resolution.
That is awful because doing all the rolling and sorting out your character is the most tedious
Takes
part.
time.
Some people freaking love it. But some
Really?
people just
Yeah.
make endless characters.
I
that
do
never
too.
Get rolled,
I've
yeah.
really adored the character making process and actually, bogging down. Like, it's so hard to start, but then as soon as you get that one idea, you roll that
Yeah.
thing, that kind of snowballs, and it's...
What a lovely segue, Sean. Can you tell us about your character and the concept for them and how you came up with it?
Yeah, sure. So, although I haven't had much of a knowledge in the area, I do love the idea of noir. And I love the idea of the noir. Hello, Nicolas Cage. And yeah, so I was looking through a lot of these characters. I thought, the fixer, I don't want to be like a big barbaric brute. I don't really want to be the combat heavy guy, but I'm not intelligent enough to be a net runner or a techie or things that require just a lot of techie fandangling. And I thought, the idea of a fixer really appeals to me. Someone that lives in the shadows and gets to just be a bit more anonymous and autonomous in what he does.
So for those listening who are not like fully versed in cyberpunk lore, a fixer is...
Yeah, so a fixer is one of the 9 different play types you can be, and a fixer is a person that gets things done. Basically, if you need something found, if you've got information that you need to draw out or buy or sell, or need to find someone, you need to do a thing, a fixer is the person you can go to. Fixer is the guy on the ground, or the person on the ground that just knows where everything is, how to get things done, and can get you things.
Yeah, I mean, more recently in the news, you had Michael Cohen was Trump's fixer, so it is a popular parlance as well. So that might be a little root in for people, I guess.
Yeah.
And Junk in particular.
So Junk, I kind of put him in under this idea that information is the root of all power for a person like Junk. He understands that it's not how much you own, it's not who you know necessarily, it's not your wealth or even sex or anything like that, or the biggest gun. It's what you know, and it's how you can use that.
So your character grew out of the philosophy and the worldview kind of first, and then the details coalesced
absolutely
around that.
It's like when I was thinking about the idea of a fix, I wanted to have like kind of almost like a mantra or motto that kind of roots the character and how they operate and like what drives them. And that was it. It's information and how information can be utilized and how it can be used as a weapon for good or for ill.
And does Junk have a little affectation, worldview, anything you'd like to kind of share that's a particular like detail about the character you've made that you really want to highlight?
Yeah, so Mr. Junk, as far as anyone knows, popped up onto the scene 2 years ago. He came as a grunt, but Junk is just, it's kind of like Cher. There is no last name. It's just Junk.
Not where I thought you were going with that.
Yeah, Junk. Just think Cher, and you've got Junk.
Yeah, okay, right.
No, he literally only popped up into people's conscious minds 2 years ago. No
So
one
he's
knows where he was before that.
An unknown quantity.
Yes.
I know that when we were developing some early concepts, mystery and having something to be discovered or hidden from other players.
That's the hook
really
that I really love. It's for me. It's always about like the story. Funnily enough, I know we did a D&D game a while ago where I was saying to Chris, who was DMing at the time, I said, "Can we do it where not everyone just meets at the same time? Can we?" Spend an hour or 2 hours just meeting all the other characters and seeing how the story weaves them all together rather than just you meet in a tavern.
Yeah, that's right.
That sort of stuff really, for me, whether it's video games or tabletop, I love the world building aspect. That's what really gets me going.
And having a bit of mystery is really a good hook into that.
100%.
Cool. So listeners, look out see if you can figure out what's going on with Junk as we get into the game. and what little things he might be hiding. Be a fun thing to follow along. Chris, tell
Uncle
us about
Bob.
Yeah,
Yeah, Uncle Bob. So I don't want to give too much away for listeners who have read the Transmetropolitan comics. It might gallop away, and the archetype that I'm playing might run away from you, so it might spoil a bit. So I won't say too much about him.
Okay.
Other than to say that Uncle Bob is a radio DJ. He runs a morning breakfast show called Wake Up Night City.
And that's at Byte Radio, which is a pirate radio station.
Yes,
which is something created for the show.
That's right. And he's an eccentric sort of man. Often whacked out on some nasty chemicals, drugs, and I don't know why I did it in that voice. Drugs.
Yeah, you can say the word drugs.
Drugs.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's right. No, we'll get that's iTunes will
Demonetized?
He's an eccentric sort of fellow, wearing a what does he wear? It's a green overall. No, it's a lime green jumpsuit.
Yeah,
with
fantastic
pink overalls.
Yeah,
and then a bright yellow fanny pack.
he looks like a bit like Mario.
I was going to say a crazy
acid.
Mario.
Yes. Yeah,
I
he
was-
looks like a
Tripping
very
out.
I
early
was gonna
90s.
say, it's
like
very confusing the picture you've just painted for me.
He's a confusing man.
because you have
Green
a
jumpsuit, pink
jumpsuit
overalls.
and overalls over a jumpsuit.
Yeah.
Yes,
with a yellow fanny pack.
Wild.
yeah, right.
This is
With
the
a yellow
future.
fanny pack.
but isn't that kind of what Mario looks like? He's got a full red, like
because it's not a shirt.
it's not a
Mario's
shirt.
wearing.
I
No,
reckon
it's
it goes
not.
the whole
Don't know
thing.
why we're
Like-
talking about Mario.
Mario with the overalls over the top. It's perfectly normal.
Yeah,
Everyone dresses like Mario. What's
that's right. So yeah, he's a strung out drug user who runs a radio morning show.
Cool.
Cool
Let's talk
beans.
about Cassie
Yes.
Glass.
Cassie Glass. So she's a rocker. Ever since 16, she's kind of been bouncing around trying to make music. Not a good childhood there.
I thought you were going to say not good music.
No. She's played with reinventing herself a lot. She's got a bit of a personality crisis, but it's also a way that she feels like she can protect herself. I was really, just inspired by a lot of the 80s. We had this big thing of subcultures going on. You know, you had the prep and the, very stylized commercial.
Breakfast Club, right? You look at all the 5 people or 6 people in Breakfast Club, however many it is, and they're all youth archetypes, aren't they? Right? They all represent a
Exactly.
subculture.
And look, basically what I did is I saw Gem and the holograms. I realized later after I made the character, I was like, that's Gem and the holograms. Like, she's got this tech and she's able to reinvent herself to try and keep herself safe. So, you know, we've got the real kind of Cass. She's got a bit more bite to her. She's a bit more punk at heart, but then she has the ability to go high gloss, high pop, corporate owned. So I think she's constantly walking a line of, being true to herself and being true to the scene at the same time of playing a part in a bigger picture.
Well, I think it's worth quickly mentioning that rockers in Cyberpunk 2020 have a bit more of a active social role than maybe musicians of today, or even of the 80s. I think they've taken what kind of 80s musicians were about and again try to dial it up and say, actually, musicians are the heart of a counterculture.
Yeah.
They command a following to a fanatic degree where they can actually get those followers to do crazy things and enact
and
their
to
will.
feel things as well in this world where, it's grim. There's not a lot left. And Sean, you talked about having a key phrase. I think Cassie has a phrase that is basically, I can save the world. It's not true. She can't save the world, but
she might not even be able to save Night City.
No,
do you know
but
what I mean?
what she does when she's on stage, she feels like she's saving the world,
yeah.
saving the lives of the people who are there, even if it's just in that song, just for a moment. She's like, we can do things, we can feel things. They may own our bodies, but they don't own us, if that makes sense. There's more.
It's interesting,
more
like, what does it take to make people to care in this world? Care enough to, incite revolution.
Yeah,
that's right. There is to kind of wrap it in a nice kind of bow. There is a really lovely thread of revolution and imminent change that exists in 2020. Some of the supplementary materials really try and push referees towards like, hey, these guys are the start of a movement. They're start of some change. They want to see the world as it is alter for the better in their favor. And I think it's fun to kind of run around in the cyberpunk world and maybe be a trauma team or whatever and do your job. But there's also an even bigger satisfaction, I think, in starting to maybe try and wrestle back the reins of the world and look at a slightly kind of bigger picture, which I think is a great thing to have a rocker in your group to do, to have that ambition. Is there anything else anyone else wants to say about themselves, what to look out for in the game or Cyberpunk in general?
I don't know if I'm preempting what you're going to say, but do we want to give listeners an insight into what going mainstream is going to be?
Sure. Without giving too much away, because you can just jump
Listen
in
to it,
and
please.
listen to the
Please
story.
do.
Going mainstream is about a bit of a heist or prank on one of those
Dastardly corporations.
I don't want to give away too much more than that.
I think that's the hook that we need. Just a heist gets people.
Yeah,
everyone loves a good heist.
Should be nice and tense and should build to a nice head. So
we're gonna wreck some shit. We're gonna destroy some status quos. We're gonna fuck the system, man.
Okay,
Yeah,
Uncle Bob.
some
Uncle Bob, calm
beautiful
down.
music.
Uncle Bob's ready. He's keen.
So I hope you enjoy Cyberpunk 2020 going mainstream. We've been Baby Beard. I'm Phil.
I'm Ellen.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Sean.
We'll catch you around. Find all of the episodes for Cyberpunk and all of our other podcasts on Spreaker, iTunes, SoundCloud, and any other podcatcher. If you like what we do, please rate and review us.
We'll see you in Night City, Chumbas.
Bye. I've got to.
Bye.
Bye.
Going Mainstream is a Baby Beard Media production. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and all our podcasts are on Stitcher, YouTube and all good podcatchers. Cyberpunk 2020 and all associated properties are trademark of R. Talsorian Games, used with permission.